are you? How are you? How are you? Brian's here. And if you're assuming that because Brian's here, we're going to be doing a true crime episode, you assumed correctly. We are, in fact, doing another true crime episode. I've had a lot of people ask for them. I've had this overview, this outline for a long time. I wanted to do it in October, and I was going to be dressed like a cute little clown, because we are doing the killer clown, aka John Wayne Gacy. Isn't that exciting, Brian? Isn't that exciting? But yeah, I wanted to dress up like a cute little clown, but it didn't happen, and that's okay, because life sucks sometimes, and that's okay. So, buckle up, buttercups, because this one's stanky. It's grody, it's not nice. I got my juice. I got my tea. I suggest you do the same. Get some kind of something to nourish your thirst, because this is a long one, guys. It's 30 pages plus some little interesting facts. So this is gotten from the information I pulled from Wiki. I pulled from some stuff from Last Podcast on the Left. I also watched that documentary. Oh god, it was on Netflix, and it was bad. It was salty. I thought it was really interesting how he talked about bisexuals and how we're just giant fuck machines, which is cool, you know, it's cool. Yeah, apparently, what did he say? Something like straight people don't, oh god, I'm gonna have to remember the quote. I can't remember. I'll put it in the description. But anyways, yeah, let's get right into it. We're doing John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown. So John Wayne Gacy was an American serial killer and sex offender who murdered and assaulted at least 33 young boys that we know of. He was known as the killer clown because he actually liked to dress up as a clown. His clown alter ego was named Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown. He actually created this persona, and it was stated that he regularly performed at children's hospitals and charitable events, but all of the hospitals that they went and was like, hey, did this dude perform here? And they were like, no. So I think he did a lot of like dressing up by himself, like he'd do it at parties and shit like that, but I don't think he actually went and did things in the Pogo the Clown outfit. I want to do a cosplay of the Pogo the Clown, but make it sexy. Because we're just depraved like that. So, according to Gacy, he committed all 33 murders in his ranch house near Norridge, which is a village in Norwood Park Township, metropolitan Chicago, Illinois. Illinois? I think it's Illinois. He had 26 of the 33 buried in his crawl space in the house. He had 3 that were buried elsewhere on the property, like in his backyard, and 4 were just dumped into the river. So he was convicted of 33 murders, and this was the most homicides committed by one person at the time. He was sentenced to death on March 13th, 1980, and sent to Menard Correctional. He spent much of his time painting, which we'll get into. He was executed by lethal injection at the Stateville Correctional Center on May 10th, 1994. 2 years before I was born. Not to the day, but like 2 years. So, let's get right into it. He was born in Chicago, Illinois on March 17th, 1942, which made him a Pisces, if you're wondering. I'm a Pisces. My mom was born March 18th, so we're all Pisces. I was born March 12th. He was the second child of John Stanley Gacy and Marion Elaine Robinson. Robison? Robeson. I think it's Robeson. His father was an auto repair mechanic and World War I veteran, and his mother was a homemaker. They were Polish and Danish, and his family was Catholic. The grandparents had immigrated to the U.S. from Poland, which was then part of the German state of Prussia. He was always really close to his mom and his two sisters, but he had a very difficult relationship with his dad. His dad was physically abusive, and he was an alcoholic, which didn't help things. His dad would belittle him, calling him dumb and stupid, and he would compare him unfavorably to his sisters. Gacy stated that one of his earliest memories was his father beating him with a leather belt for accidentally disarranging components of a car engine his father had assembled. His mom did try to shield him, but that only resulted in more abuse from his dad, with his dad calling him a sissy or a mama's boy, and who would probably grow up gay. Which is accurate. But Gacy still really loved his father, and he felt he was never good enough in his father's eyes, which he grew up to kill 33 young boys, so maybe that's correct. So in 1949, Gacy is caught sexually fondling a young girl with another boy. He was whipped with, have you ever seen, Demon Barber? Oh god, what is it? Sweeney Todd. Have you ever seen Sweeney Todd? Remember the scene where they're sharpening the razor on that leather strap? He was beaten with one of those. This was also when he was molested by a family friend who was a contractor in the person's truck. He never told his father because he feared that he would have been blamed for it, which I think probably would have been accurate. If you've seen pictures of Gacy, which this is him when he was arrested. So if you've ever seen other pictures of him, he was always overweight and he was very unathletic as a child. He had a heart condition and he was told to avoid sports at school. In the 4th grade, he began to experience blackouts, and he was actually hospitalized because of these blackouts. In 1957, he was hospitalized for a burst appendix, which I think I've been suffering from. Not a burst appendix, but appendix pain, because I've had a really sharp pain in my side. Anyways, but yeah. He later estimated that between the ages of 14 and 18, he spent a total of a year in a hospital, and he said his decline in grades was due to him missing so much school. His father, being the abusive asshole that he was, accused him of faking symptoms to gain sympathy and attention, and he openly accused his son of faking as he lay in the hospital bed. Which, maybe he did, because Gacy seemed to really thrive on attention, and he wasn't getting it from his dad, so you'll see later in life, he really likes to be in the spotlight. But his mother, sister, and a few of his close friends never doubted him, and a medical condition was never fully, conclusively diagnosed, so he could have been faking it. Like I said, his father was super abusive, and he would beat him or ridicule him without any provocation, In 1957, a friend witnessed Gacy's father emerging drunk from the family basement to begin belittling and then hitting Gacy for apparently no reason. And speaking of the basement, his father used to go down there and they would hear him speaking in different languages, and no one was allowed to go into the basement. Like, that was the dad's room. And like I said, they would hear him drinking, but also speaking to himself and answering himself in different languages. Or not languages, voices. And so I always wondered if maybe his dad was a little bit schizophrenic, but we don't know. So Gacy's mother, like I said, would try to, like, interfere, and so she tried to interfere, and Gacy would simply just put his hands up to defend himself, like he just didn't even try. And the friend who witnessed all of this said that he never saw Gacy strike his father back. He never hit him back. In 1960, Gacy turned 18, and he became involved in politics, working as an assistant precinct captain for a Democratic Party candidate in his neighborhood. So Gacy was a Democrat. I think I want to get Brian a friend. He's so lonely, and he just needs a friend. What do y'all think? Should I get Brian a friend? Comment down below if you think I should get Gacy. If you should get Brian a friend. Maybe I should start naming them after serial killers. Your name's Brian, so you can't be renamed, but that'd be kind of cute, right? So, Gacy's father also bought him a car this year for his birthday, I think, but he kept the title in the father's name until Gacy could finish paying it off, and that took him several years to do. His father would confiscate the keys if Gacy upset him, and in 1962, Gacy actually purchased an extra set of keys after his father took the originals. His father, when his father found out about this, he actually took the car's distributor cap and he kept it for 3 days. And he said that Gacy said that he felt drained and totally sick after this. Gacy said that after his father replaced the cap, that he left home and he drove to Las Vegas, Nevada. He found work within the ambulance service before he was transferred to Palm Mortuary. And he slept on a cot behind the embalming room. Embalming room. He worked there for 3 months, observing morticians embalming dead bodies. He later confessed to climbing into the coffin of a deceased teenage male, embracing and caressing the body before experiencing a sense of shock. He calls his mother right after this and asks if his father would allow him to come back. His father agreed, and the same day, Gacy drove back to Chicago. So when he returned home, he enrolled at Northwestern Business College, despite never graduating high school. But somehow he graduated from college in 1963, and he took a management trainee position. And in 64, he was transferred to Springfield, Illinois, where he was eventually promoted to manager of his department. In March of 64, he became engaged to Marilyn Myers, which was a co-worker of his. He also joined the local JCs and worked tirelessly for them. He was named key man in April of 64, so he really loved politics. Like, super duper loved them. He loved, we'll get into it. In 64, he also had his second homosexual experience. The first one being him being molested, which I wouldn't consider that a homosexual experience, but I mean, technically it was. But again, he was being molested, so whatever. He said, because if we're gonna know anything about Gacy, you should know that he talked a fuck ton after he was arrested. There's like hours and hours and hours of him being, I think like 60 hours of him talking, and he loved the sound of his own fucking voice. If you watch that documentary on Netflix, I think it's called like the killer tapes or the interview tapes or something like that. You can hear Mally meowing because she hears me in this room. And hold on. Anyways, I'm back. So where was I? Oh yeah, his homosexual experience. So like I was saying, he loved to talk, and so most of this is from Gacy in his own words. And so he said that his second homosexual experience was when a JC member performed oral sex on him after supplying him with drinks and inviting him to spend the evening on his sofa. In 1965, he'd risen to the position of vice president of the JCs, and he was also named the third most outstanding JC in the state of Illinois. Like, if Gacy wouldn't have been a murderer, like if he wouldn't have been a killer, he totally could have had a really successful career in politics because he was really good at it. He was a really good politician. But unfortunately, he was also mega gay, and he felt bad about being mega gay, so he had to go kill young boys and be mega gay. Like, there's no reason. If you're gay, just be gay. Don't go kill people. Just be gay. The worst crime that you're committing there is the killing people. Like, who cares if you're gay? Everyone loves a little bit of cock every now and then. Like, anyways. After 6 months of dating, Gacy and Myers marry in September of 1964. Her father purchases 3 KFC restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa? I was going to say Ohio. Waterloo, Iowa. The couple moved there so Gacy could manage the stores, and they move into the Myers' former home. Gacy received $15,000 per year plus a share of the store's profits. And I looked it up. That's $134,000 a year. This dude was making 6 digits, okay? Okay, he was well off. After they relocated, Gacy opened a club in the basement where his employees could drink alcohol and play pool. But only the men were allowed to come. He employed both sexes, male and female, but he only socialized with the young men. He would give many of them alcohol before he would make sexual advances on them. If he was rebuffed, like if they were like, no dude, I'm not gay, he would be like, haha, it's just a joke, I'm not gay, it's just a joke, it's just a joke. Or he would say it was to test their morals, to be like, oh, see, I'm not gay either, but I just had to make sure you're not gay. So, like, kind of dumb, but, like, whatever. So, his wife, Marilyn, gave birth to their first son in February of 1966, and then a daughter in March of 1967. He described this period as perfect. He actually finally earned his father's approval while the father was visiting in July of 66. He privately apologized for the abuse before saying, son, I was wrong about you, as he shook Gacy's hand, which would have been like peak. He peaked right here. Gacy peaked, and then after this it just all goes downhill because he wanted to be gay, and he thought that if he was, he would lose the. It's just. Brian says just be gay, okay? Just be gay. So, he joined the local JC chapter in Waterloo. He regularly worked extended hours. Extended hours to the organization after working 12 to 14-hour days managing the KFC restaurants. He would often provide chicken to his meeting, like the JC meetings, and he wanted everyone to call him the Colonel, which is weird. It's so weird. He became deeply involved in wife swapping, prostitution, pornography, and drug use while a member of the JCs. But he was held in high regard for his fundraising work. In 1967, he was named Outstanding Vice President, and he served on the board of directors for the JCs. So, like, this man was going places. He was making it. But, as they always do, in August of 1967, he sexually assaults a 15-year-old Donald Voorhees, who was a son of a fellow JC. According to Donald, he said he lured him in with the promise of showing him heterosexual stag films, which is just porno. If you didn't know, a stag film is a porno film. He gave him alcohol before persuading him to engage in mutual oral sex. Added, you have to have sex with a man before you start having sex with women. Brian doesn't approve. In the following months, he abused several other youths, one of whom he encouraged to have sex with his own wife before blackmailing him into performing oral sex on Gacy. He also tricked several teenagers into believing he was commissioned to conduct scientific homosexual experiments. And he would pay them up to $50 each for participating in said experiments. In March of 1968, Voorhees tells his father about the assault. That's a whole year after. Oh no, not too much. August to March. What's that, like 6 months? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 7 months. That's almost a year. The father immediately informs the police, who arrest Gacy and charge him with performing oral sodomy on Voorhees and the attempted assault of a 16-year-old Edward Lynch. Gacy, of course, denies the charge and demands a polygraph test, and the results indicate he was nervous when denying any wrongdoing in relation to both men. In May 10th, 1968, he is indicted on the sodomy charge. Gacy publicly denies wrongdoing and says charges were politically motivated. Voorhees Sr. opposed Gacy's nomination for JC president, so he was trying to say someone else was setting him up. Some of them actually, like some of the other JCs, believed his story and rallied for him and stood behind him, which I think is fucking baffling. In August 30th of 1968, JC, I'm gonna do that every single time, Gacy persuades one of his employees, an 18-year-old Russell Schroeder, with $300 to beat up Voorhees in an effort to discourage the boy from testifying against him in court. In September of the same year, Schroeder lures Voorhees to an isolated park, sprayed mace in his eyes, and beat him up. Voorhees escapes and tells the police, identifying Schroeder. He initially denies any involvement, but soon confesses, indicating he had done so at Gacy's request. They again arrested Gacy and laid an additional charge on him for the hired assault. On September 12th, which is my brother's birthday, they're ordered to undergo a psych eval at the psychiatric hospital of the University of Iowa. He's examined by 2 doctors over 17 days. They concluded that Gacy had antisocial personality disorder and was unlikely to benefit from any therapy or medical treatment, and his behavior pattern was likely to bring him in to repeated conflict with society. But they also concluded that he was mentally competent to stand trial. So on November 7th, 1968, he pleads guilty to 1 count of sodomy in relation to Voorhees, but not guilty to the charges related to the other youths. He said Voorhees offered himself and Gacy acted out of curiosity, and this was not believed at all. He is convicted of sodomy, and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment to be served at the Anamosa State Penitentiary on December 3rd. His wife literally petitioned for divorce almost the same day. She requested she be awarded the couple's home and property, sole custody of their 2 children, plus alimony. They ruled in her favor, and the divorce was finalized on September 18th, 1969. He never sees them again. In prison, he was a model prisoner. He had rose to head cook. He joins the inmate JC chapter and increases its membership from 50 to 650 in less than 18 months. He said he secured an increase in the inmates' daily pay in the mess hall and supervised several projects to improve conditions for inmates in the prison. One summer, he actually oversees the installation of a miniature golf course in the recreation yard. The man was like a saint in prison. I think he would have done really well if he just stayed in prison. That's just my opinion. June 1969, he's denied parole, and to prepare for a second hearing in May of 1970, he completes 16 high school courses to obtain his diploma in November of 1969. Christmas Day, 1969, his father dies from cirrhosis of the liver because he was an abusive alcoholic, and Gacy collapsed to the floor, sobbing. He requests for supervised compassionate leave to attend the funeral, but it was denied. And you have to know that his dad was just fucking disappointed in him. Like, his son, who he always said was gay, always said it, is in jail for sodomy. Like, you have to know. He knew. I told you he knew. So, in June of 1970, he's granted parole with 12 months probation. He served a total of 18 months out of his 10-year sentence. This dude served a year and a half of 10 years. The conditions of his probation included that Gacy had to relocate to Chicago to live with his mother, and that he must observe a 10 p.m. curfew. Which I don't know how they're making sure that happens unless they're like knocking on his door every night at 10 p.m. and is like, yo, are you home? You know what I mean? Like, how would y'all... This is the 70s. I don't feel like they had tracker bracelets then. You know what I mean? Like, how are y'all enforcing this? The next day, he arrives in Chicago and shortly obtains a job as a short order cook in a restaurant. On February 12th, 1971, not even a full year after he got out of jail, he's charged with sexually assaulting a young boy. The boy claimed he was lured from the Chicago Greyhound bus terminal, driven to Gacy's home, where he attempted to force the boy into sex. The court had to dismiss the case because the boy never showed up for his court case. June 22nd, 1971, he's arrested and charged with aggravated sexual battery and reckless conduct. The complaint was filed by a youth who claimed Gacy had flashed a sheriff's badge, lured him into his car, and forced him to perform oral sex. The charges were dropped after the complainant attempted to blackmail Gacy. So as you see, he just keeps getting away with it. Like, you can see his MO building. Sorry about that. I had to go scare my cat away from the door. She was going to continue to meow. Really, I thought that she was stuck in my closet, but she's not. Anyways. So, where were we? So the complainant attempted to blackmail Gacy. And like I said, you can just see his MO building. You can see the tactics that he's using here are the same ones that he uses in the coming murders. Picking them up at a bus station, flashing the fake bat. Like, it's just, if he wouldn't have gotten out of jail, none of these people would be dead. I think he would have done really well institutionalized. So you may be wondering, shouldn't his probation should have heard about this, right? He should have been sent right back to jail. But the Iowa Board of Paroles never learned of these charges. So his probation ended 8 months later. In October of 1971. Isn't that ridiculous, Brian? Yeah, that's really ridiculous. Brian thinks so too. Sorry about that. I guess someone was deciding to walk up the stairs and be loud as fuck. So his probation ends in October of 1971, and in the following month, records of his previous criminal convictions were sealed. So, with his mother's help, Gacy buys a ranch house near Norridge in Chicago. It is 8213 West Somerdale Avenue. He resides here until his arrest in December of 1978, and according to Gacy, this is where he committed all of his crimes, all 33. He was very active in the community. He threw quote-unquote lavish parties with many people attending, including politicians. There's pictures that you can go see, and like, there were themed parties. Like, he did a Western party, he did like a Civil War party, a hula, like with a big giant pig. Like, he was a party man. He was also very helpful towards his neighbors, and he willingly loaned tools and plowed snows from walkways. So in August of 1971, Gacy becomes engaged to Carol Hoff, whom he dated briefly in high school. In July, not even a month later, they are married. I believe she had 2 daughters previously that moved in with him. And if I'm not mistaken, they always asked, like, oh, did you touch the daughters? And he's like, no. Because he was a big old gay man. Like, he didn't want little girls. In fact, he loved those little girls. Not in, like, a weird way. In, like, a stepdad way. So, yeah. In 1975, 3 years later, he tells his wife that he's bisexual. He's a giant fuck machine. On Mother's Day, he tells her that they would not be having sex anymore. That would be the last time they have sex. And he begins spending most evenings away from home, returning in early hours of the morning. He would bring teenage boys into the garage in the early hours. Carol found some gay porno mags and men's wallets and IDs inside the house. And when she confronted Gacy, he would angrily tell her that it was none of her business. In October, Carol asked for a divorce. They've been married about 3 years. And so she asked for a divorce after he got mad at her for improperly balancing a checkbook, which who knows how to actually do that. Gacy agrees, but Carol continues to reside at the home until she could get her own apartment in February of 1976. On March 2nd, the divorce was finalized under the false grounds of Gacy's infidelity with women. That man was not sleeping with any women. None at all. He didn't even want to sleep with his own wife. So, back in 1971, he actually established a part-time construction company named PDM Contractors, which stood for Painting, Decorating, and Maintenance. With his parole officer's consent, Gacy worked evenings at PDM and at the line cook during the day. So this was back before his parole, his probation stopped. He first took minor repair work before expanding to interior design, remodeling, installation, assembly, and landscaping. In mid-1973, Gacy quits his line cook job so he could commit fully to PDM. And if you remember, the first person to molest him was a contractor. So it's funny how that worked out. This is when he became aware of a Jolly Joker clown club. Clown club. Why is that so hard to say? Clown club. Members regularly performed at fundraising events, parades, in addition to voluntarily entertaining hospitalized children. And like I said, I watched something and it said that they went back and talked to the hospitals, and he never went there. He never performed at hospitals, so I don't know why it says this. In 1975, he joined the clown club. Oh, no. Members of the clown club would go and do this. In 1975, when he joined the club, he created Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown. And he also created his own makeup style and costumes. He described Pogo as a happy clown, whereas Patches was a more serious character. And if you go and look at his clown makeup, you'll see that it's very hard. There's a lot of sharp edges, and they got experts in clown makeup, which I think is just fabulous. And they said that's really different because clowns usually have rounded, soft edges because, sharpness is scary and you don't want to be perceived as scary. So the fact that he had such sharp, triangular, hard edges was very different. It was not very clown-like. He said that he seldomly earned money from this, but he said that clowning allowed him to regress into childhood. I'm almost out of juice. Like I said, he performed at numerous parties, political functions, charitable events. And he would sometimes remain in his clowning garb after a performance and drink at a local bar. This clown part of him, which is weird because he never killed anyone in his clowning gear, and that wasn't a big part of his killing motive, but this is how he became known as the killer clown. Gotta love loud people in their loud cars. So Gacy hired a lot of high schoolers and a lot of young men. He would proposition workers for sex or insist on sexual favors in return for acts such as lending his vehicle, financial assistance, or promotion. So he was a typical cis manager, cis white male. He also claimed to own guns, once telling an employee, "Do you know how easy it would be to get one of my guns and kill you, and how easy it would be to get rid of the body?" So he was thinking about this. Like, he had a plan in his head. He knew what he wanted to do. In 1973, him and an employee took a trip to Florida where Gacy raped the employee. And after they returned home, after he returned, the employee drove to Gacy's house and beat the shit out of him. And at the time, he was still married. So Gacy told his wife that he had been angry over a dispute in pay. Excuse me. So in May of 1975, he hires 15-year-old Anthony Antonucci. Two months later, he visits the youth. After drinking wine and watching a stag film, Gacy attempts to wrestle the youth to the ground while attempting to cuff him. Handcuffs. He succeeds, but when he left the room, Antonucci was able to free one hand, and when Gacy returned, he pounced on him and was able to obtain the keys and cuff Gacy. First, Gacy threatened him, and then he calmed down and promised to leave if he removed the cuffs. So Antonucci agrees, and Gacy leaves. He recalls that Gacy stated, "Not only are you the only one who got out of the cuffs, you got them on me," which I think is terrifying. Like, can you just imagine this greasy, sweaty man stating this to you? Like, fucking terrifying. So, July 26, 1976, he picks up 18-year-old David Cram as he is hitchhiking on Elston Avenue. And Gacy offers him a job at PDM, and he begins working immediately. On August 21st, Cram moves into Gacy's home. The next day, they celebrate Cram's 19th birthday with drinks, and Gacy, dressed as the clown, cons Graham into putting on the cuffs, and he swings Graham around intending to rape him, but Graham, is it Graham or Cram? I think it's Cram, but my C's look like G's. Cram kicks Gacy in the face and frees himself. A month later, Gacy appears at Cram's door intending to rape him, saying, "Dave, you really don't know who I am. Maybe it would be good if you give me what I want." How disgusting. Cram resists, straddling Gacy, who leaves before saying, "Oh, you ain't no fun." It takes him so long to move out. He moves out on October 5th, and leaves PDM, although he would periodically work for Gacy over the following 2 years. Which is just baffling to me, because if someone tried to rape me twice, I would not have anything to do with them. But that's just me. Shortly after Cram moves out, another employee, 18-year-old Michael Rossi, moves in. He worked for PDM since May of 1976, and he lives with Gacy until April of 1977. He sometimes assisted Gacy in clowning at grand openings of businesses. Gacy would go as Pogo, and Rossi would go as Patches. So, at this time is when he entered the local Democratic Party. He initially offered use of his employees to clean party headquarters at no charge. He was rewarded for his community service with an appointment to serve on the Norwood Park Township Street Lighting Committee, earning the title of Precinct Captain. In 1975, he's appointed director of Chicago's annual Polish Constitution Day Parade, and he supervised this until 1978. He was actually, through this appointment, he was photographed and met with the First Lady, Rosalind Carter, on May 6, 1978. So there's a picture of Rosalind Carter shaking John Wayne Gacy's hand. So, because of this, he later became, this picture became an embarrassment to the U.S. Secret Service, mainly because they didn't check his background enough to know, this man was convicted of sodomy and should not be around the president or his wife. But in the pictures, Gacy's wearing a S pen, the letter S, indicating a person's given special treatment. You gotta love this country, man. Gotta love it. So, we're getting to the murders now. Gacy murdered 33 young men and boys, like I said, and he buried 26 of them in his crawl space. The victims were people he knew. It was random people that he lured from the bus station in Chicago, from, parks and streets, and he would promise them with jobs, drugs, money, for sex. Some were grabbed by force. Others were conned into believing that Gacy was a cop because, like I said, he had a badge and he put a spotlight on his Oldsmobile. He usually lured victims solo, but sometimes he would do what he called doubles nights, which is disgusting. His MO was to ply victims with drinks, drugs, or generally gaining trust before producing a pair of handcuffs to show a magic trick. He would pretend to get them out. He would pretend to get out of them, but really he was hiding the key, so then when the victim tried, they couldn't escape the handcuffs. When he would finally, get them in the cuffs, he would go, "Oh yeah, the trick is, you gotta have the key." Isn't that fucking terrifying? This man was terrifying. He would then rape and torture the victim. He began by straddling the victim before forcing them to give him fellatio. He would inflict acts of torture, including burning with cigars, making his captives imitate a horse as he sat on their back, and pulled upon makeshift reins. He would violate them with foreign objects such as dildos, prescription bottles, etc., after he would sodomize them. He would immobilize them before he tortured them. So he would manacle their ankles to a 2x4 with handcuffs attached to each end. this was inspired by Dean Coral, I think it's Coral, which is a Houston mass murderer, which I will be covering. He also verbally taunted his victims throughout the entire process. He would sometimes drag or force victims to crawl in the bathroom, where he would repeatedly drown them and then revive them just to prolong the abuse. He stated he would kill them when he wanted to. It's okay, Brian. He's dead. He would typically murder his victims with a tourniquet around their neck before using a hammer handle to tighten it. He referred to this as the rope trick, telling victims, "This is the last trick." In one instance, he read part of Psalm 23 as he tightened the rope, which I don't know what Psalm 23 is. Let's go figure it out. So, just had to go look up what Psalm 23 is, because I'm not religious, and it is basically like, the Lord is my shepherd, I'll want for nothing, I lay in green pastures, and he restores my soul, or something like that. So that's kind of, really gross. Really gross. So, where were we? Oh, yeah. So he would read that psalm as he tightened the rope around the victim's throat. Occasionally, the victim would convulse for an hour or two before dying, and several victims died by asphyxiation from cloth gags stuffed deep in their throat. All but 2 victims were usually killed between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. So he was a night owl. After death, Gacy usually stored the bodies under his bed for up to 24 hours before burying them in the crawl space. He would sometimes pour quicklime to hasten the decomposition. Some of the victims' bodies were taken to his garage and embalmed prior to their burial. So, this is the first murder that Gacy commits. For the longest time, they didn't know his name. They just called him the Greyhound Busboy, but his name is Timothy McCoy. January 2nd, 1972, New Year's, Gacy leaves an event to view a display of ice sculptures because he was bored. He lures 16-year-old Timothy from the Greyhound bus station, and they return. I got lost. So he lures 16-year-old Timothy from the Greyhound bus station. Gacy found out that the boy was returning from a Christmas vacation, and he was told he would be returned the following morning to catch his bus after spending the night with Gacy. On January 3rd, Gacy claimed to have woken to find McCoy standing in his bedroom door with a knife in his hand. And so Gacy jumps from bed, and McCoy raises his arms in a surrendering motion, but accidentally cuts Gacy's arm. Gacy grabs the knife, bangs the boy's head against the wall, kick him into the wardrobe, and walk towards him. McCoy kicks Gacy in the stomach, doubling him over, so Gacy grabs McCoy, shouting, "Motherfucker, I'll kill you," before wrestling him to the ground and stabbing him repeatedly in the chest as he straddled him. So Gacy goes to the bathroom to clean the knife before going to the kitchen to see an open egg carton and unsliced bacon on the counter. He also sees 2 place settings in his dining room table. So McCoy had intended to wake Gacy and absentmindedly brought the knife. And he was just trying to make him breakfast. He was just trying to be nice. He just slept with this old man, did God knows what with him. And Gacy's not attractive, mind you, not at all. And so yeah, Gacy kills him. I have hair all over me. Look at that. Look at that. So yeah, he was just trying to make him breakfast, and Gacy kills him. But I think we don't know how much of this is true, mind you. Like, the stab wounds are there, yes, when they find the body, but that's it. I mean, killers like to give themselves allowances, and so he could have, like I said, he's been thinking about doing this for so long, and then he sees the boy standing there with the knife, and it's just fight or flight, because he's already wound up, he's already been imagining it, he's already been thinking about it, and so this is just his opportunity to do it, and so he does. So Gacy buries McCoy in the crawl space and later covers the grave with a layer of concrete. He recalled later that he felt totally drained, but while listening to the, quote, gurgulations and gasping for air from McCoy, he experienced a mind-numbing orgasm. He came his pants watching this boy die. He's quoted as saying, "That's when I realized that death was the ultimate thrill." Let's just sit on that for a second. Hooey. Okay, Gacy's second victim is said to have been murdered in January of 1974. The victim remains unidentified. He strangled him before putting him in a closet. The victim's bodily fluid leaked out from the mouth and nose, staining the carpet. And as a result of this, Gacy would stuff rags, underwear, etc. in the mouth of his victims, preventing this in the future. So he can be learned. He can be taught. Not the kind of teaching you want, but it's what happened. So in July of 1975, he meets 18-year-old John Butkovich. His car was found parked with his jacket and wallet inside and his keys still in the ignition. The day before, Butkovich had confronted Gacy over 2 weeks of outstanding back pay. The victim's father called Gacy, who claimed he would be happy to help search for the boy, but was sorry he had, quote, run away. Knowing full well that Gacy just fucking killed this boy, and he's gonna go help search for his body when it's literally in his crawl space. So he was questioned by the police for this, and Gacy claimed that Butkovich and 2 friends had arrived at his house demanding the back pay. He claimed they reached a compromise and the boys left. Over the following 3 years, the Butkovich's parents called the police more than 100 times, urging them to investigate Gacy further. And did they? Not at all. Not at all. Gacy admitted to encountering Butkovich and waved him over. He and Butkovich got into Gacy's car and went back to his home. He said he offered him a drink, conned him into handcuffs, sat on him for a while before strangling him, stowing his body in the garage, intending to bury him in the crawl space. But when his family returned earlier than expected, Gacy buried the body under the concrete floor of the tool room extension of his garage. In 1975, Gacy admits that this was the year he began to increase his frequency of excursions for sex with young males. He called this cruising. Following his divorce, in 1976, so we're back to, we're caught up. He murdered two people when his wife was still living, his ex-wife technically. His neighbors noticed erratic changes in his behavior following the divorce. This included seeing him keep company with young males, hearing his car arrive and depart in the early hours of the morning, or seeing lights turn off or on in the early hours. One neighbor recollected that for years the sound of muffled, high-pitched screaming, shouting, and crying had repeatedly awakened her and her son in the early mornings. Why wouldn't you report this to the police? Why wouldn't you go to the police with this information? Like, if I thought that I heard screaming next door more than once, I'm sorry, but I'm calling the fucking cops. Guys, we're almost halfway done. Okay, so in 1976, these are just his victims now. So there is Daryl Sampson, 18. He was last seen alive in Chicago on April 6th, 1976. He's buried under Gacy's dining room with a section of cloth lodged in his throat. Oh, trigger warning, I guess, right now. Next was Randall Reffitt. He was 15. He disappeared on the afternoon of May 14th, shortly after returning home from a dental appointment. He was last seen by his grandmother. Samuel Stapleton was 14. He vanished hours after Reffitt was last seen as he was walking home from his sister's apartment. He and Reffitt were close acquaintances. Both were buried together, leading investigators to believe they were murdered on the same evening. As Gacy would put it, a double. Michael Bonin, 17, disappeared while traveling from Chicago to Waukegan on June 3rd. He was strangled with a ligature and buried under the spare bedroom. All in the crawl space, by the way. This is just in relation to where in the house. William Carroll was 16. On June 13th, Gacy murders and buries him in a common grave. This is the first of 4 victims killed between June 13th and August 6th that were all buried together. 3 were 16 and 17 years old, and 1 is an unidentified male. James Hackinson was 16. He was a Minnesota youth who was last seen phoning his family on August 5th, possibly from Gacy's phone. He died of suffocation. His body was buried in the crawl space beneath the body of 17-year-old Bennisville youth named Rick Johnson, who was last seen alive on August 6th. Between the months of August and October, he murders 2 more unidentified victims. Kenneth Parker and Michael Moreno. They are abducted teenage friends who were last seen on October 24th outside of a restaurant. There is William Bundy, who is 19. He is a construction worker who disappeared after informing his family he was going to a party, and he worked for Gacy. He died of suffocation and was buried beneath Gacy's master bedroom. There is Francis Alexander. He was 21. He was murdered sometime between November and December. He made a call to his mother sometime in November, and he was buried in the crawl space directly beneath the Gacy's office. Gregory Godzik was 17, and he was a PDM employee who disappeared in 1976 in December. He worked for PDM for less than 3 weeks before his disappearance. He informed his family Gacy had him digging some kind of drain tiles in his crawl space. His car was located in Niles. His family contacted Gacy about his disappearance, with Gacy claiming he had run away and had told people he wanted to do so. He also claimed there was an answering machine message from Godsick that he had deleted. 1977, there's John Cizik. I don't know how to say this. He's 19. He's lured to Gacy's home on January 20th under the pretext of selling his Plymouth satellite. He strangled Cizik in the spare bedroom. He claimed that Rossi was asleep in the house and that he later sold Rossi the satellite for $300. There was John Prestige. He was 20 and disappeared on March 15th of 1977. Gacy buried him in a crawl space above Francis Alexander's body. Before disappearing, he mentioned obtaining work from a local contractor. Gacy murdered one additional unidentified youth and buried him in a crawl space in the spring or early summer of 1977. The exact time is unknown. There is Matthew Bowman. He is 19 years old from Crystal Lake, and he was last seen at a train station, and he was killed on July 5th. In June, Rossi is arrested for stealing gas while driving Cizik's car. It was tracked back to Gacy's house, and when interviewed, Gacy said Cizik sold Gacy the car in February, saying he needed the money to leave town. The VIN confirmed the car belonged to Cizik, and police didn't pursue it further, but informed Cizik's mother he had sold the car. Robert Gilroy was his next victim. He was an 18-year-old who was the son of a Chicago police sergeant. He was last seen on September 15th. He lived 4 blocks from Casey's home. He was murdered and buried in a crawl space. On September 12th, Gacy had flown to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for a remodeling project, and this is cited most times to support Gacy's claim of assistance from 1 or 2 more accomplices in several murders. Like, a lot of people believe he had help. A lot of people think Rossi helped him. I mean, Rossi did help him dig holes, but, like, helped him lure people in. He believed there was one unnamed person in the case, like in the court case. So there was extenuating circumstances. It's not believed that he did this all by himself. There was John Mowery. I don't know how to say that. He was a 19-year-old former Marine who disappeared after leaving his mother's house to go to his apartment. He was strangled and buried under the master bedroom. In October, there's Russell Nelson. He's a 21-year-old Minnesota native who was last seen outside a Chicago bar, and he was looking for contracting work. Gacy buried him beneath the guest bedroom. 4 weeks later, there's Robert Winch. He's a 16-year-old Kalamazoo citizen who was buried in the crawl space. In November, there's Tommy Bowling, who's a 20-year-old father of one who disappeared after leaving a Chicago bar. There is 19-year-old Marine David Talsma, who disappeared after informing his mom he was going to a concert in Hammond, Indiana. He was strangled with a ligature and buried in a crawl space close to John Mowery, who was also a Marine. I wonder if he did that on purpose. Okay, guys, we're on page 17. We don't have that long to go. So, this is about the time that Gacy is running out of room. He's got a lot of people in his crawl space right now, and so he's trying to figure out how he can satiate his need without... Sorry, I need to move my leg. Without killing, without having a body to dispose of. Because Gacy didn't like the body. It wasn't about... He wanted... What is it? Product and I can't remember the other one. He wasn't a product killer. He didn't want the body. He processed. He liked the process. He was a torturer. He... Once they were dead, it was just a thing he had to take care of. And that's why they were just thrown in graves like they were. And so he meets 19-year-old Robert Donnelly, who was a student that he abducted from a Chicago bus stop at gunpoint. He drives to his home, where he rapes and tortures the boy. He is repeatedly dunked into a bathtub until he passes out, and Gacy taunts him with statements like, "Aren't we playing fun games tonight?" It was a game for him. Everything was a game. It was a trick. It was a magic trick. It was, let me show you this game. Let me show you this trick. I bet you can't get out of these. I bet I can. Like I was saying, everything's a trick and a game to him. It's for sport. And it's scary. So several hours later, after being tortured and raped, Gacy drives Donnelly to his workplace and releases him, warning if he went to the police, they wouldn't believe him. And so later, when he testified at Gacy's trial, like the big one, he said that he was in such pain that he asked Gacy to kill him, and Gacy replied, "I'm getting around to it." What? I'm getting around to it? Like, it's... So he, of course, reports the assault, and police question Gacy. On January 6, 1978, Gacy admits to having had a sex slave relationship with Donnelly and insisted everything was consensual. Said he didn't pay the kid the money he had promised him. And this being the 70s and police being extremely homophobic at the time, even now, believed him and said, "Oh, it's a gay thing? We don't want any of that." And filed no charges. In February of 1978, he meets William Kindred. He's a 19-year-old who disappeared after telling his fiancée that he was spending the evening in a bar. He is the final victim buried in the crawl space. In March, he meets Jeffrey Rignall, I think it's Rignall, however. He's a 26-year-old that Gacy lured into his car when he chloroformed him and drove him to his house. He restrained Rignall's arms and head in a pillory device affixed to the ceiling with his feet locked into another device. He explained that he had complete control over Rignall, and he intended to do what he wanted whenever he wanted. He raped and tortured the boy. I shouldn't say boy, he was 26. The man. He raped and tortured the man with various instruments, including lit candles, whips, etc., while repeatedly chloroforming him into unconsciousness. He drove Rignall to Chicago's Lincoln Park, where he dumped him. He was unconscious, but alive. He staggered to his girlfriend's apartment and informed police, but Gacy was not investigated because he couldn't remember anything. He was able to recall Gacy's car, the Kennedy Expressway, and particular side streets. So one day, him and his two friends staked out the Cumberland exit of the expressway, and in April, Rignall spots the Oldsmobile. They follow it to 8213 West Summerdale, and they go to the police. And the police obtain an arrest warrant, and Gacy is arrested on July 15th and faces trial for battery. Fucking battery. He tortured and raped this man for hours, and he gets battery. He said at this time is when he had no more room for bodies in his crawl space, and later confessed to police that he considered stowing bodies in the attic but worried about leakage. He chose to start dumping bodies off the I-55 bridge into the Des Plaines River. He stated he dumped 5 bodies, one of which he believed had landed on a passing barge, but only 4 were found. In June, he meets 20-year-old Timothy O'Rourke, who disappeared while going to buy cigarettes. He told his roommate a contractor on the northwest side had offered him a job. He is the first victim dumped in the river. In November, 19-year-old Frank Landingen is killed on the 4th. He was dumped in the Des Plaines River, and his naked body was found on November 12th. There is 20-year-old James Mazzara, who was an Elmwood Park resident who disappeared after sharing Thanksgiving dinner with his family on November 24th. He informed his sister the day before that he was working in the construction industry and was doing, quote, all right. He was last seen walking towards Bughouse Square carrying a suitcase. December 11th, 1978, he meets Robert Peist, a 15-year-old boy who worked at a pharmacy in Des Plaines. Gacy was there to discuss remodeling with the owner. At the time that he sees Peist, he mentions that his company often hires teenagers at $5 an hour hires teenagers at $5 an hour, almost double what the pharmacy paid, while in earshot of Peist. So he's trying to, lure him in. Gacy leaves, and Peist's mother comes to pick up her son so they could celebrate her birthday as a family. This story's so fucking sad. It's so fucking sad. So he asks his mom to wait because some contractor wants to talk to me about a job. He leaves at 9 p.m. and promises to return shortly. He was murdered shortly after 10 p.m. at Gacy's home. Gacy stated that he asked Peist whether there was anything he wouldn't do for the right price, to which Peist replied he did not mind working hard. Gacy responded good money could be earned by hustling, but Peist was dismissive. Peist is the first person that is missed, if that makes sense. Peist is the reason why he goes to jail. If he wouldn't have killed Peist, he probably could have killed 40, 50 more people. So, Gacy again tries the fucking handcuff trick, and he says, once they're on, I'm gonna rape you, and you can't do anything about it. And Peist begins weeping. He stated that as he placed the rope around Pice's neck, the boy was crying and scared, which is just so sad. It's so sad. He said that Gacy remembers receiving a phone call from a business acquaintance as the boy lay dying on his bedroom floor. Can you imagine just picking up the phone being like, oh yeah, no, I have time to talk while there's a literal boy dying on your floor? So, the boy never returns home for his mother's birthday. It's literally her birthday that he died on. Like, can you imagine how sad that would be as a mother? The family files a missing persons report with the Des Plaines police. The pharmacy owner, Phil Torf, named Gacy as the contractor Pice had most likely left the store to talk a job about. Lieutenant Joseph Joseph K. I'm not even going to try to say that. Joseph K. chose to investigate Gacy further. After speaking with the family, he became convinced Pice didn't run away. A criminal background of Gacy revealed he had an outstanding battery charge against him in Chicago and served a prison sentence in Iowa for the sodomy of a 15-year-old boy. 20 more pages, guys. I'm totally kidding. 10 more pages. So Kazak, I don't know how to say this, and 2 other officers visited Gacy at his home. Gacy indicated he had seen 2 youths working at the pharmacy, but he was adamant that he had not offered Pice a job and only returned to the pharmacy shortly after 8 p.m. as he had left his appointment book at the store. He promised to come to the station later he couldn't at the moment as his uncle had just died. When asked when specifically, he replied, "You guys are very rude. Don't you have any respect for the dead?" Do you understand? Do you understand what he just said there? You guys are rude. You don't have any respect for the dead, when he's literally sitting on top of 26 dead fucking bodies. At 3:20 a.m., he arrives at the police station, covered in mud, claiming to have been involved in a car accident. So he returns that day. He denies any involvement and repeats he never offered Pice a job. And when asked why he returned to the pharmacy, Gacy reiterated that he had gotten a call from Torf because he had left his appointment book at the store. Torf denies calling Gacy. At the request of the detectives, Gacy prepares a written statement detailing his movements that day. So this is when they start to investigate Gacy. They start to realize, like, yo, this dude is fucking crazy. What is going on? So they obtain a search warrant on December 13th. They found many suspicious items, which I will now tell you about. They found several police badges. They found a 6mm Brevettada starter pistol, a syringe and hypodermic needles, handcuffs, books on homosexuality and pederasty, which is sexual relationship between an adult male and a prepubescent boy. These books were called The Great White Swallow and Pretty Boys Must Die, which you cannot buy anymore. I looked it up. They found pornographic films. They found capsules of amyl nitrate. They found an 18-inch dildo. 18-inch dildo? Let me repeat that again. 18-inch dildo. They found 2x4 with 2 holes drilled into each end. They found a bottle of Valium and atropine. Several bottles. It says bottles. They found several driver's licenses. They found small underwear, which Gacy was not a small man. A blue parka. They found a high school ring engraved with the initials Jas. They found the Nissan receipt in the trash. The Nissan was the pharmacy that he was at. They found a 36-inch section of nylon rope, also in the trash. Let me just repeat that for you. An 18-inch dildo. I have big dildos, but I don't have an 18-inch dildo. Like, that's ginormous. So this is when the police begin to survey Gacy. They monitor him and they investigate his background. They receive a phone call from Rossi informing them of Gregory Godzik disappearance and that another PDM employee named Charles Hatula had been found drowned in an Illinois river earlier that year. They learned of Rignall's charges against Gacy, including the rape, torture, and dumping at Lincoln Park. They learned from Gacy's ex-wife of the disappearance of John Butkovich. The high school ring was actually traced back to John Allen Cizik. They learned from Cizik's mother that several items from her son's apartment were missing, including a Motorola TV set. This is also when Gacy starts to taunt and act real friendly with the police that are monitoring him. He would regularly invite them in to join him at restaurants or for drinks at the bar in his home. And if they did, because sometimes they did, hoping that he would confess or something, he repeatedly denied any involvement in Pice's disappearance. He accused officers of harassing him because of his political connections or his recreational drug use. He flouted traffic laws and exceeded in losing his pursuers more than once. This is when the police interview David Cram, and he describes Gacy's hardworking lifestyle and open-minded attitude about sex between men. He also revealed how Gacy had given him a watch because of his poor timekeeping skills, saying Gacy got it from a dead person. Police also interview Michael Rossi, who informed them that Cizik's vehicle was sold to him by Gacy, who bought it from Cizik as he needed money to go to California. They investigate Gacy's Oldsmobile. They find fibers believed to be human hair in the trunk. They use cadaver dogs to see if Pice had been in any of Gacy's vehicles. And so the dog laid on the passenger seat of the Oldsmobile, and the handler informed investigators this was a death reaction, indicating Pice's body had been present in the vehicle. His dead body. So Gacy invites two of the detectives to a restaurant for a meal, and in the morning he invited them to another where he talked about his business, his marriages, and his clowning. He remarked at one point, clowns can get away with murder. Gacy began showing signs of strain due to the surveillance. He's unshaven, he's disheveled, he appears anxious, and begins drinking heavily. He actually planned to prepare a $750,000 civil suit against the department, demanding that they cease the surveillance. So, you remember the receipt that they found in his trash? Well, they track it back to the pharmacy to a 17-year-old Kimberly Byers who worked with Pice. When she was contacted, she admitted to wearing his parka that also belonged to Pice, the blue one that they found at his home, placing the receipt in the jacket before giving it back to Pice when he left to speak to the contractor about a job. This contradicted Gacy's statement about having no contact with Pice. In the documentary on Netflix, they talk about this a little bit more, and they said that Pice was such a good guy, and she had went outside to go smoke or something, and it was real cold, and then she went and bought pictures or something, it was a photo receipt, and so she just puts it in the jacket, and then forgets about it later on. And I think at the time she remarked that she couldn't get the photos because she didn't have the receipt or something like that. So this is when they try to obtain a second search warrant. Rossi's interviewed for a second time and told police that Gacy had instructed him to spread 10 bags of lime in the crawlspace. Police began compiling evidence for a second search warrant while Gacy's lawyer filed the civil suit. He invites detectives into his home on December 19th. While one distracted Gacy, the other tried to write the serial number of the TV set in Gacy's room down, believing it to be Sizzix. While using the restroom, the detective noticed a smell that he thought could be rotting corpses emitting from a heating duct. Because that's the thing. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that Gacy's house smelled. They knew it. They just thought it was Gacy. They just thought it was a fat boy smell. And he would blame it on the water, water seeping in the crawl space or bad piping or something, anytime someone would remark on it. But he had people over all the time while he was murdering these people, and they were just oh yeah, Gacy's house smells, it's whatever. I've never smelled a dead body, but I've smelled rotting animals, and if that smells anything like a dead body, I couldn't imagine. How do you just sit there and have barbecue while you're smelling this? I just don't understand. So on December 20th, police interview Rossi and Cram. Rossi undergoes a polygraph with the detective, quote, unable to render a definite opinion as to the truthfulness of the responses due to Rossi's, quote, erratic and inconsistent responses. He discussed the trench digging in the crawl space. He remarked on Gacy's insistence that he did not deviate from where he had instructed to dig. Cram informed them of Gacy's attempt to rape him in '76, also stating Gacy had turned pale when he discovered a clump of mud on the carpet that he suspected to be from the crawl space. After the first search on December 13th, he said Gacy immediately entered the crawl space to see if there was any digging done. When asked if Cram had ever entered the crawl space, he replied he had once been asked to spread lime down there and to dig trenches for drainage pipes, but the trenches were the size of graves. On December 20th, Gacy drove to his lawyers to talk about the civil suit. He appeared disheveled and asked for a drink, to which his lawyer, Sam Amarante, went to get a bottle of whiskey from his car. On his return, Gacy picked up the paper with the front page being an article about Peist. He pointed to the picture and said, "This boy is dead. He's dead. He's in the river." He proceeds to give a haphazard confession that ran into the early hours of the morning. He confessed to being the judge, jury, and executioner of many, many people, and now wanted to be the same for himself. He confessed to burying most of his victims in the crawl space and others in the river. He dismissed the victims as being male prostitutes, hustlers, and liars to whom he gave the rope trick. He added sometimes he awoke to find dead, strangled kids on his floor with their hands cuffed behind their back. Said he buried their bodies in the crawl space as he believed they were his property. As soon as he confesses all of this, he falls asleep, right on the desk, and his lawyer schedules a psych eval for that morning. When he awakes, Gacy denies confessing, saying, "Well, I can't think about that right now. I've got things to do." He leaves, ignoring his lawyer about the psych eval. Gacy recalls later that his last day of freedom was, quote, hazy, saying that he knew his arrest was inevitable, I know how to speak, and that he wanted to visit his friend to say his final farewell. So Gacy drives to a gas station and hands a small bag of weed to the cashier, who hands it to the surveillance officers. He said Gacy told him, "The end is coming. These guys are going to kill me." Gacy then visits fellow contractor and friend Ronald Road. He hugged him and burst into tears before saying, "I've been a bad boy. I killed 30 people, give or take a few." He then drives Cram home to meet him and Rossi. Officers noted on the way he was praying with a rosary. Gacy had Cram drive him to several locations, including his lawyers, Leroy Stevens, and Mary Hill Cemetery, where his father was buried. Cram tells detectives that Gacy had told him about confessing to his lawyer the previous night. Police draft and are granted a second search warrant, specifically looking for Pice's body in the crawlspace. They also arrest Gacy for possession and distribution of weed in order to keep him in custody, as they believed he was about to commit suicide. When told about the search warrant, Gacy denies that the boy was in there, but he does confess to killing a boy in self-defense and burying him under his garage. Thinking, oh, if I just confess to this one, they won't look in the crawl space. They won't look there. They'll look somewhere else. But they arrive to Gacy's home, and they discover that Gacy had flooded his crawl space, so the police begin to clear it and begin digging. They began digging in the southwest area, and within minutes discover putrefied flesh and human arm bones. The tech shouted to investigators that they could charge Gacy with murder, saying, "I think this place is full of kids." More techs start digging in other areas and discovered more bones, with some on top of others, which confirmed the scale of murders. When hearing of the crawlspace discoveries, Gacy told officers he wanted to clear the air. So, on December 22nd, Gacy provides a formal confession stating he murdered 30 people who entered his home willingly. He claimed he didn't remember most of his victims' names, stating they were mostly male runaways or prostitutes, and he also claimed he had planned to cover the crawlspace with cement for further concealment. He confesses to luring and killing Pice in his home and disposing of the body in the Des Plaines River. He's later driven to the I-55 bridge to pinpoint the exact location he disposed of the bodies. So, in the crawlspace, they begin searching for other victims. To assist in this, Gacy draws a rough sketch of where the bodies were located in the crawlspace. I think I have pictures of it, actually. I thought I did, but I don't. So bodies were put into body bags and labeled with numbers as they were unearthed. And this is another trigger warning. I'm just gonna let you know. Body number 7 was found in the fetal position with a cloth gag found in his mouth, leading investigators to believe he was asphyxiated. I know how to talk. Body number 8 was found in a Body number 8 was found with a tourniquet used to strangle him, still knotted around his neck. I had forgotten about that. Body number 9 was found beneath a layer of concrete and found with several stab wounds to the ribs and sternum, suggesting that this was Gacy's first victim. Because Gacy liked to asphyxiate. He didn't like to stab. He wasn't a stabber. Body 10 and 11 and 12 were found face down with a ligature around their necks. Body 16 was found with a cloth rag lodged deep in his throat, causing him to suffocate. Bodies 17 and 18 were found with ligatures around their necks. Body 22 was found with a section of cloth-like material lodged in his throat, and 2 socks were recovered from the pelvic region. Bodies 24 and 26 were found with cloths in their mouth or throat. Due to the blizzard of 79, things stalled but resumed in March, with Gacy insisting all the victims had been found. Body 28 was found wrapped with several plastic bags and buried beneath the patio. All of the bodies were in advanced stages of decomposition. Dental records and X-ray charts helped Cook County Medical Examiner Robert Stein identify the remains. IDs were supported with personal items found in Gacy's home. Heads and upper torsos of several bodies were found in plastic bags. Several were found with ropes still around their necks, with some with foreign objects lodged into their pelvic region, with positioning indicating they had been thrust into the victim's anus. Stein concluded 12 of the victims had died of asphyxiation, not strangulation. Gacy's home was demolished in April of 1979. Pice's body was discovered on April 9th, 1979. Upon autopsy, 3 wads of paper-like material had been shoved down his throat while he was still alive, causing him to suffocate. So, the trial. Gacy was charged with 33 counts of murder on February 6, 1980. He was tried in Cook County, Illinois, before Judge Louis Garapo. Jury was chosen outside of Cook County because of press coverage, and when I say press coverage, I mean fucking press coverage. Like, there was hundreds of, that might be a exaggeration, but there was so many, like, every time they brought out a new body, there was footage of it. Like, you can see them bringing out the bodies, you can see them in the bags. Some of them had to be brought out in bins because it was just slushy, juicy body stuff. Like, I don't think it says it here, but like in the documentary, it was talking about how these men would literally, it was like a soup. It was like a decomposing body soup. So, the defense requested Gacy to spend over 300 hours with doctors while at Menard Correctional Center in the year before his trial, trying to see if he was mentally competent for trial. Gacy attempted to convince them he had multiple personality disorder. He had four personalities. 1, the hardworking, civic-minded contractor, the clown, the active politician, and Jack Hanley, or better known as Bad Jack. He was a homophobic policeman who hated male prostitutes and seen them as weak, stupid, and degraded scum. He opted to plead not guilty by reason of insanity and presented as a Jekyll and Hyde character. Apparently, he would try to do voices for Jack, and like he would do this weird twitching thing, and then like it's just ridiculous. It's just fucking ridiculous. The defense produced several psychiatric experts. 3 testified that they found him to be paranoid, schizophrenic, with multiple personalities. Prosecutors It's just so stupid. Prosecutors presented that Gacy was sane and in full control of his actions. They supported this with several witnesses that claimed Gacy's actions were premeditated and he took efforts to escape detection. They had doctors that refuted the defense's multiple personality and insanity plea. Cram and Rossi testified about the trench digging and lime spreading, claiming he had specific areas they had to dig in and they could not deviate. Stein testified on the status of the bodies. He stated they were remarkably, I feel like I'm saying that wrong, decomposed, putrefied skeletal remains. 13 were asphyxiated, 6 with ligatures, 1 of multiple stab wounds to the chest, and 10 in undetermined ways. This refuted Gacy's claims that they all died of accidental erotic asphyxia, because that's another way that they tried to say this all happened, is that it was just sex games gone bad. Like, how do you have 33 sex games gone bad? Maybe you're not doing your sex games right, my friend. Rignall testified for the defense regarding his ordeal. He wept repeatedly while describing the beastly and animalistic ways he was attacked. During certain questioning, he vomited and was excused from further testimony. Like, this is how terrifying this man was to these people. This dude couldn't even stand up in front of the court without having a visceral reaction to this man. Can you imagine? You're having to sit across from the man who raped and tortured you and be asked questions about it while he's leering at you? Voorhees testified about his ordeal and subsequent attempts of dissuasions. He felt unable to testify, but did briefly before eventually being asked to step down. Robert Donnelly testified about his encounter with Gacy on December of 1977. He was visibly distressed as he recalled the abuse. He came close to breaking down several times. Gacy laughed at him as he testified, and Gacy's lawyers tried to discredit his testimony, but Donnelly never wavered about his account. Like, this man is literally laughing at your trauma, laughing at something that changed your life forever. Like, you were never the same after this. And he's just sitting there laughing at you. It's fucking evil. So Gacy writes a letter to the judge requesting a mistrial for various reasons. One being like his lawyer or something. Like, it's in the documentary, I can't remember exactly. But the judge dismisses it and continues with the trial, of course. So the closing arguments were dramatic. So the prosecution argued that the defense's contention of insanity, they referred to it as a sham, citing Gacy's ability to think logically and control his actions. They cited the doctor's testimony in his 1968 trial, which concluded he was an antisocial personality capable of committing crimes without remorse. During the closing, the prosecution removed 22 photos of the victims from a display board and threw them at the door to the crawl space because they had taken it and put it and they were like using it in court. So he like took the pictures and threw them at the door and was like, show mercy, show the same sympathy this man showed when he took these lives and put them there, and like throws them out the door. And he asked the jury to not show sympathy, but show justice. Justice. The defense attempted to portray Gacy as a man driven by compulsions. Compulsions he was unable to control. They urged the judge to set aside any prejudice and deliver a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity. He added that Gacy was a danger to both himself and others, and that studying his psychology and behavior could be a benefit to science, which he wouldn't be wrong, but he still deserves to go to jail. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, which is the minimum amount that they could for the amount of cases that they had. They found him guilty of 33 charges of murder. They also found him guilty of sexual assault and taking indecent liberties with a child. And like I stated, at the time, this was the most convictions for any person in the U.S. So, he was sentenced to death for each conviction, and his execution was set for June 2nd, 1970. Gacy spent 14 years on death row at Menard Correctional Center. He was interviewed by Russ Ewing numerous times between 79 and 81. And this was later published in a book with Tim Calhill called Buried Dreams. He was stabbed in the arm by a fellow death row inmate on February 15th, 1983. He filed numerous appeals and motions, but succeeded in none. The final appeal was in October of 93, and it was denied, and the Illinois Supreme Court formally set an execution date for May 10th, 1994. Some reason, it kept getting pushed back, and I can't remember why, but it's not important. It just eventually, May 10th, 1994. So on May 9th, 1994, Gacy was transferred to Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill for his execution. He was allowed a private picnic with his family. His last meal consisted of a bucket of KFC chicken, fried shrimp, french fries, fresh strawberries, and a Diet Coke. They observed prayer with a Catholic priest before being escorted to the execution chamber for the lethal injection. So when he was in the chamber, there was complications with his IV tubing, and so the window of the chamber was covered so the tubing could be replaced before opening the window again. This took 18 minutes. This error led to Illinois to adopt a new method for lethal injection. William Kunkel, which I believe was the prosecution, said he got a much easier death than any of his victims. Reportedly, his final words were, "Kiss my ass." There were bystanders who wore shirts that said, "No tears for the clown," which I would love one, actually. So he was confirmed dead at 12:58 a.m. on May 10th, 1994. His brain was removed and given to Helen Morrison. She was a witness at his trial and interviewed Gacy and other serial killers in an attempt to isolate common personality traits of violent sociopaths. His body was cremated. So, that is all that I have written down, but there was some things that I wanted to talk about because, let's see, there was something about after the fact they implemented something because of everything. But I don't remember what it was. Hold on. Because it was really interesting, and I don't remember why I didn't write it down. Oh, okay. Here it is. So it says, in 1984, Sam Amarante, which was his defense lawyer, authored procedures that were incorporated by the Illinois General Assembly into the Missing Child Recovery Act of 1984. Amarante has since said the primary inspiration for this legislation was that at the time of Gacy's murder, Illinois police had to wait 72 hours before initiating a search for a missing child or adolescent. Because of this, they removed the 72-hour waiting period. Other states across America subsequently adopted similar procedures. As a result, national network aimed at locating missing children was gradually formed. This has since developed into a child abduction emergency commonly known today as the Amber Alert. So yeah, because of Gacy, we have sort of the Amber Alert. Also, I was talking about his paintings. He did a lot of paintings. He did, oh god, so many. And he was allowed to earn money off of them. They were sold, and many have been displayed at exhibitions. Others have been sold to various auctions, which included prices ranging between $200 and $20,000. Following Gacy's execution, family members of his victims publicly burned several of his paintings, which is kind of stupid because, I mean, like, not stupid because, you know, he's fucking evil, but it'd be kind of cool to own one, like, just a little bit, just a tiny bit. But, yeah, I think, that's it. Yeah. There's a random fact that said recreational use of cannabis remained illegal in the state of Illinois until 2020. I guess that's cool. Yeah, so that is Gacy. I can't believe we just did that, but yeah. Apparently he gave Bob Wrestler a painting, and it was written in the inscription, "Dear Bob Wrestler, you cannot hope to enjoy the harvest without first laboring the fields." And that's just disgusting. Apparently, Wrestler lived just 4 blocks from Gacy in Chicago, and Gacy had delivered groceries to Wrestler's family. I think this is believed to be one of his accomplices, and that's why he gave him the painting, and that's why, like, the cryptic message. So, like, grody. So, yeah, that's John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown, Pogo the Clown, as he liked to be called. I hope you enjoyed this. I know Brian didn't. I don't know why. It's just so grody. It's so stanky and musty and disgusting. And I hope you liked this. A lot of people requested another true crime video, and there it is. I'm gonna do another one. Comment below what you'd like to hear next. I'd really want to do like an alien one, like supernatural type shit, but I'm having a hard time finding information on what I want to do it on, so we'll see. But yeah, comment below what you think. Tell me what your clown name would be. How about that? If you've gotten this far, which is like 2 hours in, tell me what your clown name would be in the comments. And yeah, let's see who has the best one. Anyways, Brian says goodbye. I'm saying goodbye. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye.